Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back again to English poetry. Last time we defined poetry. I gave you the chance to express your own thoughts about what you think poetry is. We also examined 12 famous English definitions of poetry. Today, we will study our first official poem for the course. And I know this is an English poetry course, but I always like to give my courses comparatively in a comparative sense so we can understand how different cultures, different poets, different ages do probably the same thing more or less. So the first poem is by a Palestinian poet, Palestinian young poet, an icon actually. His name is Tamim Al barghouti. Probably you are all familiar with Tamim Al barghouti's work. But before we go to Tamim Al barghouti, I want to ask you again to tell me what definitions you remember from last time. Okay, remember the 12 definitions. So which one do you still remember? Which one do you cherish? Which one do you consider to be probably the definition closest to your heart? Mara. Poetry is a criticism of life. That's one of the most powerful modern definitions. And usually I gave you this question to think of how the definition could possibly reflect the age, the time. If I say poetry is criticism of life, and I compare it to the neoclassicist definition of poetry, teaching and delighting, how are they related or not? Yeah.
Poetry is to take life by the throat.
Poetry is to take life by the throat. Does this indicate violence? What do you think? Because of course this is a metaphorical definition.
Yeah.
Defining a language heavily based on metaphors, using metaphors, is not sometimes the wisest thing to do. But I think this is deliberately done. So what would you understand? I know some of you objected to this, and some of you loved this, by the way. So what does it indicate? Like taking life by the throat, of course, metaphorically. Please.
I think that means like talk about anything that makes you feel that you want to make it out of you.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a feeling of anger or of sad or anything of sorrow, so you want to get this feeling out, so you can use poetry.
Okay, thank you.
I feel like it means the poet was patient for a long time, and it came to this moment when he said that's enough.
He or she. Okay, so the moment comes when he or she, the poet, does what?
Like he feel his boring of being patient. That's enough.
Okay, thank you very much. The feeling of having had enough and finding a way to release this through poetry could be part of it.
So that it's an expression of feelings, and at the same time it gives you, as a poet, a feeling of control for your life.
Uh-huh.
So this is something that maybe like you cannot control your life in real life, so you refuse to poetry.
Trying to make sense out of the mess around us, the chaos. Because, yeah, this is an act of violence, holding somebody, don't do this. But it's also an act of controlling the object, whatever you're dealing with. And life is uncontrollable. So if in poetry you try to release, you have had enough, and you try to make sense out of the environment, out of life, probably this is some kind of controlling life. Another definition, please.
It's the one with Wordsworth.
Okay.
It's the spontaneous of feelings.
Are you sure this is Wordsworth, not someone else's?
Yes, I'm sure.
Okay, say it again.
For me, it's my favorite because I think that
What's the definition again?
the definition is the spontaneous overflow of feelings.
Thank you very much. Please don't forget the second half of Wordsworth's definition.
Yes, I like it because I think that poetry is a purely experience, personal experience that doesn't have to teach or give moral lesson. So it's purely, simply experience, personally experience or personally feelings that the poet feels and expresses.
Okay, different schools have different opinions. You seem to believe in the romantic definition of poetry more than any other definition. One more, please.
The rhythmical creation of beauty.
The rhythmical creation
Of beauty.
of beauty, turning beauty, the abstract thing, into music, into still music is still abstract, but it's more probably concrete when rendered in poetry. One more.
Poetry is painting.
Poetry is painting. Poetry is painting, but we don't use paints in poetry. But again, when we talk about imagery and images in poetry, the images and imagery in poetry, an image is something you can feel, touch, hear, or smell. So there is imagery in poetry that is similar to the colors and the shapes we do when painting. One more.
Poetry is as exact as science and geometry.
And you like this? Or did you have a chat with Rahaf about how good or bad this definition is?
We had a chat, but we both agreed that William Wordsworth's definition is the best.
Okay.
I hate it.
So isn't it fine?
So you couldn't come to compromise about this?
No.
Okay. Well, finally, please, somebody, yeah? Okay, so you like the definition that highlights the fact that poetry is different from prose because there is rhythm, there is music there. This is what basically makes it, because in rhyme, sometimes we don't have rhyme in poetry. We don't have at least a regular rhyme in poetry. There's blank verse, there's free verse. But sometimes, and sometimes again, we have musical prose. But the fact that you're emphasizing the music aspect here of poetry, that tells how, I'm not sure how, if you want to compare poetry personally with prose, which one you would be preferring here? What do you think? Poetry or prose? Which one do you like reading more? Are you sure? Okay, nice. So I tried to summarize, just to remind you, that to choose 5 out of, just probably basically randomly done here. But yeah, I agree that this is significant because with Sydney and the neoclassicists, teaching and delighting being a reason behind poetry and literature, that remained for more than 1,000 years. Many people still believe today that the first purpose of writing, of poetry, of literature, is to teach and delight. And then we come to your favorite definition, the spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions, recollected in tranquility, the romantic definition of poetry. I know most of you like this, no offense to you, but we are at a time here, at an age where, yeah, overflow of emotions. I'm not sure at the end of this course, or in 2 years, 5 years, 15 years, whether you believe literature to be, or poetry to be, not only an act of taking life by the throat, but an act of, I don't know, shooting life right between the eyes, and as an act of protest. And then familiarizing and defamiliarizing things. Criticism of life, poetry is a way of taking life by the throat, that you just mentioned. And then last time we ended the class with very significant points here. When you comment on poetry, criticize poetry, there are many ways to do it. But because you don't usually do it in an organized way, like academically, because this is you doing academic courses here, sometimes you miss many points when you answer a question or talk about a point. All I want you to do is follow the academic logics here, where you go for the topic sentence, for example. When you say something, when you believe in something, when you see something in the text, go for the topic sentence, which has the topic and the controlling idea. And then many students do like jump from the topic sentence to the examples. Don't do this, or the evidence. I usually say something, say it again, in other words, and then give examples or an example or evidence. Meaning, if you believe that the poem has, going back to Ali Abu Na'ma's poem, if you say, I don't believe Ali Abu Na'ma is, or the speaker in the poem is going to change. most of you will always say, like, I don't think that the speaker is going to change because, for example, try not to do this. Try to explain what you mean by the topic sentence, but by the main idea here you have. So if you say something in the first sentence, when you open your paragraph, try to make it general. This is usually you making a judgment. I could differ with you, I could agree with you, but that's not where I give or don't give marks. Please always differ with people. Don't just follow people's ideas and opinions. So if you say, for example, the speaker in this poem is not willing to change, or the text shows here that the poet is not going to change. What do you mean by this? Explain it. Say something about it. Say something to make it clearer. If the poet is expressing regrets, perhaps he's not going to be a different person later on after the poem. And then you go for example, and there are two types of evidence. Number one, textual evidence. Use the text itself, like the use of regrets as plural can be. This is evidence. The use of the past simple tenses. This is evidence. You tell me, like, in this word, in this phrase. I don't expect you to memorize the poems, by the way, but I expect you to know these, like, little words and phrases. And so in the poem, the poet did this and that. He said this and that. She said this and that. Regrets as plural could be used as evidence to indicate that somebody is willing to change. I don't have just one regret. I have regrets. Regrets, sorry. So the plurality here could be an indication that there is a willingness to change. Now, the second type of evidence is based on thoughts, ideas. And again, I totally encourage you to express your opinions. But try to mix and vary here. In the same idea, in the same argument, try to use this and that to show that you are a critical human being. And again, going back to Ali Abu Naim's poem, you could say the poet is willing to change. Basically, the very act of writing the poem is an expression of change. At least if he doesn't want to change, he wants other people to change. Okay, this is what we did last time. Any question before we move to poem number 1 by our favorite poet, Palestinian poet Tamim Al barghouti? Please, someone? Go on.
You said that the evidence based on ideas and thoughts. How could it be based on ideas? If I have an idea, I will prove it by the text and then the
Yeah, that's a valid question. My idea is that, like, when I say thoughts, like how you feel about the poem, generally, like personally. I encourage, because some people, I know many people who say, no, anything you say about the poem has to be supported by textual evidence. Yes, but not always. So if you say that the poem, here the poet is trying to engage in a dialogue with somebody, show me where the dialogue is. Who is he dialoguing with? Okay? But you could say the poem is a protest against patriarchy. And the fact that this is a woman writing differently, let's say Emily Dickinson, the use of dashes, the sharp, the short poems sometimes, the sharp images. Maybe this is where I could say, I don't see it. But you could still argue that this is, for example, a particular woman writing against a particular set of beliefs. We'll see more with poems. Okay, so yeah, finally we come to this poem that I believe most of you love very much. So remember the 4 steps we usually do. We look at the poem, right? We recite the poem, and then we try to understand the difficult meanings, the new meanings, the phrases, the expressions. And number 3, we try to understand the poeticality of the text, the literary devices, the metaphors, the examine link between what we notice and what the poem or the poet says. So let's just look at the shape of the poem. Okay, this is stanza number 1. And this is stanza number 2. We usually don't see poems like this. They usually either follow this highly structured, highly organized form, or this formless, free verse, blank verse kind of writing. And this is stanza number 3, 4, etc., etc. Okay, so what do you notice, please? Yeah.
Okay, well, as you said, we noticed that the first stanza starts in a traditional, more of a traditional way, the old way, which is like the broken, I think you can say, verses, and then it goes to 3 verses, and I think this is very...
No, again, first stanza. How would you comment on this? How would you describe this part of the poem?
The same sounds.
Okay, even if you don't know Arabic, you could still guess that the sounds here, the last 3 letters are the same. And probably not always. In Arabic, they do usually. But in English, don't be tricked by the letters. All we care about is the sounds. We've seen again in Ali Abu Rahman's poem, there was I, there was cry, and there was sigh. But the sound is what we care about. And this is called the rhyme. Al-qafiyah. The ending sound or sounds of a line of verse. The sound here is phonemically transcribed I. Despite the fact that the letters are totally not related. In Arabic here, we have suruha, tazuruha, duruha, yudiruha, sururuha, tudiruha. We call this a regular rhyme scheme, not only a rhyme, because you will find a regular rhyme scheme. That's good. So there is regularity here. What else? Please.
He used a classical way in writing the poem, or the first stanza of the poem, to show that...
Okay, I'll come back to this. Again, my first question always is about noticing things without reading. Even if you don't read here, you still can guess that there's some kind of repetition in the last sound. Thank you very much. If you do this, the poem is going to look like this beautiful box that we want you to think out of all the time. It's a block. What else do we notice about the shape and the form of the poem? Please.
Each line is split into...
Thank you very much. Each time is split in half. What do you call this? Thank you very much. أثمرت مادة الأدب. Caesura. Caesura from Caesar, Caesarian. That's nice. All the lines are divided into 2. All the lines end in the same 3 letters. Same sound. Now, we look at the poem as we read it. So somebody please read the first stanza. Okay, Mara. Could you speak up?
مررنا على دار الحبيب فردنا عن الدار قانون الأعادي وسرورها فقلت لنفسي ربما هي نعمة فماذا ترى في القدس حين تزورها ترى كل ما لا تستطيع احتماله إذا ما بدت من جانب الدرب دورها وما كل نفس حين تلقى حبيبها تسر ولا كل الغياب يضيرها فإن سرها قبل الفراق لقاؤه فليس بمأمون عليه سرورها متى تبصر القدس العتيقة مرة فسوف تراها العين حيث تدني.
That's beautiful. One more. Yeah, please.
مررنا على دار الحبيب فردنا عن الدار قانون الأعادي وسورها فقلت لنفسي ربما هي نعمة فماذا ترى في القدس حين تزورها ترى كل ما لا تستطيع احتماله إذا ما بدت من جانب الدرب دورها وما كل نفس حين تلقى
That's also beautiful. One more. I don't want you to make mistakes in the grammar.
فرحنا على دار الحبيب فردنا عن الدار قانون الأعادي وسورها فقلت لنفسي ربما هي نعمة فماذا ترى في القدس حين تزورها ترى كل ما لا تستطيع احتماله إذا ما بدت من جانب الدرب دورها وما كل نفس حين تلقى حبيبها تسر ولا كل الغياب يضيرها فإن سرها قبل الفراق لقاؤه فليس بمأمون عليها سرورها متى تبصر القدس العتيقة مرة فسوف تراها العين حيث
Thank you. Also excellent. So, does the reading make a difference? The recitation, reading aloud? Does it give you any sense, the musicality of it? You feel that it's actually the same meter again and again. I'm not sure what bahar this is, what meter this is in Arabic. Probably mutafa'ilun, mutafa'ilun, fa'ulun, whatever. I have to check with some guy in the Arabic department. But we do the same, we do say the same thing. And it's like musically speaking, we go up and down, up and down, up and down in the same way in the 6 lines. So when we read this, we could add to the fact that, again, highly regular shape, regular rhyme scheme, the caesura in the middle, the gap, the pause, and then the music, this is what we call the rhythm, the music of the poetry. In Arabic, some people now say the rhythm. It's the same, the rhythm. Okay, so what else do we notice again? About the language, about what he says, the vocabulary, the choice of words, and other things. Please.
Again, it's a classical beginning in the meaning. Like he talked about the beloved of heaven.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it is not the basic subject of the poem.
That's an excellent thing to notice. This is a poem written, I'm not sure how long ago, 15 years ago or so, 10 years ago. And the poet, in the other groups, I asked them to take the first line and to try to quiz the people around them, the people they know. Your mom, your friends, somebody in the taxi, people studying something other than, Arabic, people who don't know Tamim, maybe not familiar with the poem. So probably you need to go look under some rock here or there to find somebody who doesn't know this line. And ask them, can you guess who the poet is here? مررنا على دار الحبيب فردنا عن الدار قانون الأعادي وسورها. And please report to me. Tell me what they think about the author, the poet behind this. My guess is that many people, or at least some people, will not recognize Tamim or will not relate this line to someone alive, contemporary poet. Because of the way, at least, number one, because of the way he begins. Classically, many Arab poets started their poems, opened their poems. In Arabic, we call it al-istihlal. Tastahil shay, to begin. In English, you said the opening, the beginning. By beginning with, passing by the home, the houses, of the beloved. And also standing over the ruins of a past, tribe or something, connecting the present with the past. So mararna ala dar al-habibi is a classical way of beginning poetry. The Arabs did this many, many, many times in the past. When we're talking about 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. What else in addition to this? What else do you notice? Please.
It's from the same thought.
It's filled with the same.
The same thought.
What's that?
Rhyme scheme. And meter.
No, the foot is different from the rhyme scheme.
Meters. Same meter.
The same. We're not familiar with the meter here, but when we read it, it sounded the same. مررنا على دار الحبيب فردنا عن القدس قانون الأعادي وسورها فقلت لنفسي ربما هي نعمة. It's the same movement we do here. It can easily be sung, by the way. And that's why it's called lyrical poetry. Almost all poetry is lyrical because it can be sung. More about the words, the language. Yeah? Please?
We use simple language, not
The language is basically simple, true. This is simple language. What is the most difficult word here? يضيرها and darar, to harm something, to hurt something. Simple language, that's true. More. Please.
He uses contradiction when he says تلقى والغياب وتساوي الضير.
Okay, so there are a lot of binaries here, the opposites. He used many words to mean the thing and its opposite. Like what? Like what? Yeah.
اللقاء والغياب.
اللقاء. Where is the liqa? Okay, there is here talqa, and there is also, where is it? Same line. What else? Tusar. Thank you very much. Yudir. This is called binary opposites. Binary opposite. Al-firaq, liqa'u. What else?
تبصر ترى.
Tubsata is the same. Al-habib, al-aadi. Now we call this binary opposites. If you're studying mathematics, if you know mathematics, there's the 0 and 1 opposites. And this is again a very important place to start in a poem. Try to understand the opposites in the poem. Can we find more opposites other than these? I think you can. If you dig deeper, please. Habib al-Aadi. What else? More. Huh? Excellent. Mararna. Again, with the intention of being there, passing by to visit. And then we were sent back. Faraddan. True. More. What else? Okay, go back to things you notice about the poem. Please.
He uses dialogism and dialogue.
Okay, where's that?
With himself.
Please. Respect your friend, yeah.
Dialogue.
Where's that?
فقلت لنفسي ربما هي نعمة فماذا ترى في القدس حين
Okay, that's also beautiful. Here, I'm not sure who he means here by Mararna. Probably the poet with friends and family, or with other people going to visit Jerusalem. And again, but then the moment there is here hope of meeting somebody you like, going somewhere you love, and then the enemy occupier sends them back, or at least makes it difficult to be there. And then he probably talks to himself here. The dialogue this is an internal dialogue, but it is still a dialogue. فَقُلْتُ لِنَفْسِي. He didn't speak to someone else, to anyone else. I don't know why. رُبَّمَا هِيَ نَعْمَةٌ فَمَاذَا تَرَى فِي الْقُدْسِ حِينَ تَزُورُ. That's a beautiful thing to notice. There is a dialogue. There is a dialogue. And again, this is the reply. He's still talking to himself, engaging in a dialogue with himself. More, please.
I like the way at the last one, متى تبصر القدس العتيقة مرة. I like the meaning that when you...
If you say متى تبصر القدس, it's different from متى تبصر القدس.
Yeah. متى تبصر القدس, because we are the act. I like the way that when you saw when you see the Jerusalem for once time, you feel like it will be in your memory for all of your life. So
okay.
سوف تراها العين حين تديرها.
Wherever you go, whenever you are, because this is again the power of imagination. This is the power of recollecting in tranquility. This is Wordsworth. This is a romantic concept. More. Okay, so there is us, people who come to visit, and also there are the enemies, the others. The others. Okay, please.
Can you say like there is a synoptically and تاريخ العين?
Because it's one eye. This is a common expression. Even in English, you'll find people using just one eye. In my mind's eye, Hamlet would say, for example. But possible, yeah. Like using one eye just to mean the two eyes.
I think the reason behind using the classical way, like first
we're not talking about the reasons now. Let's wait. Let's just collect data, collect information. Let's see how things, go. And then finally we come to the possibly of a why question.
He uses the if at the last two lines.
In the last two lines, conditionality. There's a condition here. If you see it, it won't be a guarantee. You will be happy. It will please you. Whenever you see, if you see Jerusalem only once, even once, you'll see it wherever you go. That's true. If, please. Oh, I love this. No, wait. Don't jump. And this is again what I just said. That your problem is he used different tenses, past simple, and then you jump. Why would you jump to the second point? Finish this. Make it clear. So the tenses, when you study a poem, it's important to examine the tense or the tenses and the shift from one tense to the other. This is part of understanding the poem. So here, this is past simple tense. This is past simple tense. This is past. This is present. This is also present. This is present, past, present, nice, past, present, no, future. And تديرها is also present, could be possibly connected with the future. يعني فسوف تراها حين تديرها. So a poem, a short stanza in a poem that includes 3 tenses. Past, a lot of past, and some present, and also future. Okay, so look at what we did here. Number 1, we noticed the form. And we concluded that the form is highly irregular because of 3 things. Number 1, the shape. It looks like a box, a block. And then the way it ended in the same sound or sounds. We call this rhyme, a regular rhyme. And also we noticed the caesura, the break, the gap in the middle. By the way, Old English poetry used to employ the same poetic technique, this device in the middle. But later on, they started using punctuation marks to create the caesura, the break. So that's number 1. And then number 2, when we read it, we felt that this is musical. This is poetry because of the way it reads when you recite it. And then we looked at the binaries, the opposites. We realized that there is Habib, Aadi, غياب, يلقى لقيا, تسر, يضير, are like basically 3 or 4 major binaries, opposites. And then the language itself, one of you said this is simple language. But I'm not sure if you paid attention to this. The vocabulary, the diction here, the word diction from dictionary, the language, the poetic diction here is also inspired by old Arabic poetry. دار الحبيب, ممكن العادي, اللقيا, الفراق, etc. The words, the vocabulary, if you take them out, you feel that these are. It doesn't mean we don't use them these days, but the way it sounds like an old Arabic poet. And then most importantly, I think, the fact that it opens with a very famous old Arabic way of starting poetry. مررنا على دار الحبيب. عنترة بيقول يا دار عبلة بالجواء تكلمي. مظبوط. قيس ايش بيقول؟ أمر على الديار ديار ليلى. Right? وقيس بيقول أرى البين يشكوه المحب, البين, البعد, فراق. محبون كلهم. فيا رب قرب دار كل حبيبين. Like the dar here, the house, the home of the people you love. This has always been there in Arabic poetry. Okay, more before we move.
He used questions and answers in the same time.
Where are the questions?
فماذا ترى في القدس حين تزورها؟ ترى كل ما نفسك احتماله. Also متى تكسر القدس العتيقة مرة؟
Okay, thank you very much. This is a question. What would you see in Jerusalem when you visit her or it? But this is not a question. This is not a question. This is conditional. This is the meta that means if or when, whenever or. So there's one question here, not more than one question. Now, the second part of the poem. See, what we do is that we try to notice things, to build up a case, to create patterns. To create a pattern or patterns. And then we move, for example here, we'll move to the second part to see if we find the same things there. In order to try to answer your question here, Roseanne, why? Okay? Yalla, let's see. What do you think? If you're not familiar with the poem already, I could have asked you to tell me if this is part of the same poem or not.
No.
Many would say, it's not the same. They don't look the same. It doesn't fit. Please. Before that, again, remember, always go easy. Shape, what do you see? Is this as structured, as organized, as regular as the first part?
It's irregular, but it has a pattern at the same time.
There could be a pattern. The thing with this, if you check online resources, you'll find different websites using different ways of layout for the same poem. I saw websites going for making this one whole line because it's one thought and going for a long line. في القدس بائع خضرة من جورجيا برم بزوجته يفكر في قضاء إجازة أو في طلاء البيت.
Basically, that's because Tamim's poems depend on this.
That's called spoken poetry or performance poetry. Spoken poetry. There is poetry that is meant to be delivered, performed by the poet himself or herself. It reads differently, totally differently. So number one, compared to the first part, this is kind of irregular. Do we have the same sounds or letters repeated at the end? So possibly there is no rhyme, at least there's no rhyme, or there is an irregular rhyme scheme. What else? What else do you notice? Say again? There is a lot of repetition. في القدس, في القدس, في القدس, في القدس, في القدس, في القدس. That's like how many في القدses? That's 6 of them. More? Let's do the way we did with the first stanza. There's no break in the middle of the lines. There is no break. Although, again, sometimes the comma or a punctuation mark could function as a caesura. It doesn't have to be physical space. But yeah, there is no break in the middle of the line. More. Different lengths. True. So probably different musical pattern, different rhythm, different meter maybe. More. Basic, thank you very much. No rhyme scheme. Whether you end it here, البيت أحكامها 20, etc. or زوجته بيت عليا أحكام, totally different. There's no rhyme scheme. Please.
I guess he used a lot of preposition and did it in the same stanza.
A lot of
Preposition.
prepositions like what? Okay. في على من على. Okay. I don't know why, but I think, yeah, you have a point. More? Please.
The last 2 lines are like a couplet of Shakespeare.
Okay, nice to notice this. The last 2 lines rhyme. More musical. The last 2 lines, probably because this is بعمرات تبيع الفجل في الساحات طول اليوم في القدس دب الجنب المتعالين فوق الغيم. Possibly. But they're not the same, like the same. Is it the same? No, this is a little bit different. We'll come to this. Okay?
Besides the lines, it's more songs.
Not always. This is small, this is long, small, long. It varies. It's shapeless. The second part is formless. Probably this is blank or free verse. And then we come to the conclusion here, to the question. Why is the poet using two different forms of poetry in the same poem? Why does the poet shift? Why does Tamim here, or the speaker, shift from a highly regular, highly structured, well-organized form of poetry to a shapeless, formless kind of poetry? Is there a reason? And again, don't ask whether Tamim or the poet meant it or not.
The text.
We deal with the text. I'm not sure how you reacted when you first heard this poem or read this poem. Did you feel that there was a jump, an abrupt shift?
When it's read, no.
When it's read, no?
Only the whole rhyming thing.
Personally, when I first heard the poem online, Amir al-Shu'ara, I was like, oh, there was a subject, probably because I'm specialized in poetry. I felt it instantly and was like, there is a reason here. Why is he shifting? What's going on in the first stanza that we don't have in the second stanza, or vice versa? Please. Yeah.
It attracts you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is not a poetic answer. I know at school you used to say, to attract the attention of the reader, to emphasize these two things mean nothing. Because the question is, why, again?
I think there is
And how? We just mentioned the how. But if you say, to attract the attention of the reader, this is not a poetic answer. This is not a critical answer. This is a school answer. To emphasize the idea. Where is the emphasis?
What's the idea?
And what's the idea? This is what we do at university. So yeah, the repetition, you could say here, the repetition of Fil-Quds, 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 to emphasize the idea. What idea? See my point? We usually we are here to learn how to be as poetic as possible. Please.
maybe it refers to Jerusalem itself.
Say again.
It refers to Jerusalem itself.
What?
The first stanza, it was highly organized as Jerusalem was before the Israeli
Nice.
occupation. And the second stanza, after the Israeli occupation came, and how Jerusalem is occupied.
That's beautiful. More, please.
I'm not really sure how to express myself, but I'm trying. And the first stanza, he was describing what's from outside where there's the walls and he reflected the walls with the rigid form. And in the second stanza, when he went inside Al-Quds, it's small areas and the harat, and so he used the blank verse to describe it's not as organized.
So what's happening from the outside? What can you see from the inside? And what is there inside that makes it change shape and form? Please. Yeah.
Because I think that it's related to Jerusalem itself, like you can say. Because when he used the classical way of poetry, he emphasizes that Jerusalem is exists from years old.
Uh-huh.
And still existence because he, like Jews say that
We don't say Jews. It's not about Jews.
Israel, the Zionists say that Jerusalem is to them, not
Okay.
for us. So he used first the classical way to emphasize that Jerusalem is ours, but the second, and it is still ours.
Okay. So you're connecting here the old form with what used to be. How Jerusalem is ours. Bringing the past with the present. Thank you.
He was trying to put us in the same atmosphere that he felt at that time.
Okay.
He was expecting to see Jerusalem organized and
Nice.
great. And then when he got into Jerusalem, he got shocked at the variety of places.
Okay, I like this point. So point number one, the first part is the expectation that Jerusalem in our mind and heart, in our imagination, the city that we as Palestinians can't even visit. So we have this beautiful, poetic, perfect image of Jerusalem. And that's how it is from afar, from a distance. But once inside, things are totally different. Please.
But then, when you come to think of it, he says, "ترى كل ما لا تستطيع احتماله." So he knows, but he's going to
What makes it unbearable here in the first part? Why is it that you can't endure things you see in Jerusalem?
He's expecting to see the chaos inside.
But he knows there is, he senses that there's this. But it's the enemy occupiers that is making it probably unimaginably horrible,
Can I say my
humiliating. So the first part here is organized, like some of you are suggesting, because this could reflect some kind of expectations. Yes, he knows, everybody knows that. I'm sure even the poet, in his imagination, cannot deny the fact that Jerusalem is occupied. It's controlled by enemies.
I was discussing this with a friend yesterday, and it's her idea. She said that.
Who's that?
Sally.
Okay.
She's in our class. She said that starting it this way is kind of resistance, because starting it in the way that Arabs used to write poetry a long time ago. It's like saying, although you might Zionize Jerusalem, but it is still Arab, and I'm going to start the way that Arabs start poetry.
Okay, this is some kind of insistence. Now this is ours, and we have the shape that we can make Jerusalem fit in, or I don't know, like insisting that Jerusalem is ours as much as these poetic traditions of the Arabs are ours,
Yes.
belong to us. More.
I go with the idea of resistance, but at the same time, I think that it's more of an act of appreciation for the old classical way, and saying yes, I do appreciate this style of writing, but at the same time, I want to create my own style of writing, and he goes for the second and the rest of the poem.
So you're saying the change here is because Tamim wants to be different to shift from the Arab traditions of writing poetry?
Yeah, exactly.
Why? What's happening in the second stanza that makes him shift? That's the question.
He goes inside the city. He goes
What?
inside and starts seeing everything.
What's going on inside Jerusalem? Who is there?
The enemy.
Not us.
He's talking about what the enemy does to Jerusalem.
Okay, if this is a story, who are the characters in the second part of the poem?
The enemy and
Someone from Georgia,
Yeah.
someone from Upper Manhattan, someone from Bologna, whatever this is, someone from, what's that? Ethiopia, possibly around Ethiopia, and someone from France or the UK or Brazil or Canada or Australia. The only Arab person, and then also the blonde tourists coming to Jerusalem. The only person here is this poor, nameless, faceless woman doing stupid thing. Sorry, no, there's no business, no work is stupid work, but she's selling this turnip kind of thing, al-fijl. It's not sage or thyme or olive oil or olive or something. So in the second stanza, what I'm saying here is that while the expectations, Tamim, or all of our expectations, have you ever been to Jerusalem? I asked this maybe before. How many of you? Like 3? Oh, that's very few again. So the point is, when you go there, for whatever reason, you have these great expectations. Like, wow, the beautiful, the ancient city, our eternal capital. But once you are there, and we know that there is the Israeli occupation all the time controlling it. But again, the expectations are high. When you go there, what do you do in Jerusalem? Basically, of course, you could go eat kaik or whatever first and foremost. But we go to pray, thank you, to worship. Because the spirituality of Jerusalem, the place itself has this sacred aura about it, spirituality. By the way, if you Google Jerusalem syndrome, there's this crazy thing that people believe in, that if you go to Jerusalem, you kind of lose it sometimes. Some people lose it because of, I don't know why. So you go, you pray. Yes, you take pictures. And you take pictures with the Dome of the Rock, with the, the famous stairs there. the scenery, the old places, the souks, the old streets and alleys. You don't go take pictures with stupid fijil here. And I love how Tamim is using fijil. Because those tourists, those enemy occupiers, those intruders, do not understand the nature of this city. The traditions here, the heritage is that as Palestinians, za'atar, rihan, mumkin, na'na, right, mint, sage, thyme. These are identity things, issues. Fijil, you could live for 2-3 years without eating fijil. But those people say, wow, let's take a picture with this woman selling this grenade kind of thing. So I'm suggesting is that, and look at this man, what is he doing? He came all the way from Georgia to fight with his wife here. I think we have had enough fights with our wives. We don't want more people, more negativity. Planning to do what? In Jerusalem. This is to me, this is unfathomable. Many people will say, like, if I am in Jerusalem, if I were in Jerusalem, I would be just, I don't know, resisting all the time, probably praying all the time. The spirituality here comes first. And then the old man coming all the way from Upper Manhattan, teaching people who came all the way from this place. And look at this guy from Africa, closing. Jerusalem should not be closed. No place of worship should be closed or controlled this way. And look at that gun, the machine gun. Remember there's the other poem, جداتنا بقول مجندة عندها 9 من العمر. She isn't 18 years old. She is 9 years old and 9 years old. This is how small and little she is, young she is. This man, the machine gun is on this settler because compared to the gun is even bigger than himself. لم يبلغ شيء قبعة. Look at this. قبعة تحيي حاط المبكى. Not even someone like deliberate, because we've seen Christian Zionists familiar with this concept. Christian Zionists, Christians who believe that the Jews have to convert to Christianity at the end of the day. They love Israel not because they love Israel, but because they hate Israel. Because they believe that at the end of the day, all Jews should come to Palestine, to Jerusalem, to Palestine, so they can convert to Christianity. And the people around Trump are some of them. So those people, and even some, I don't know, some Jewish Zionists from the end of the world, they come here, they don't just come for the spirituality of Jerusalem, they just, I believe that some of them are religious people and they believe in this. But others just like, they want to show off, they want to take the picture. And many times they come here on free tours. The birthright, paid. If I tell any one of you, okay, let's go on a paid tour, you just pay nothing. 2 months, 1 month, you go anywhere around the world. Many of you would be willing to say, okay, I'm in. But be careful, because sometimes you will be like destroying others like those Zionists are doing. And again, the blonde foreigners coming here, they don't see Jerusalem. And that's why Tamim says, somewhere لا يرون القدس, they don't see Jerusalem. Because there are 2 Jerusalems. The Jerusalem that is ours, it belongs to the Arabs, whether Christians or Muslims, by the way. Because he will be emphasizing, and this is a feature of Palestinian poetry about Jerusalem. I've noticed this all the time. If a Palestinian poet writes about Jerusalem, there are always Christians and there are always Muslims. There's always the church, there's always the mosque, there's always the Bible, and there's always the Quran there. Because Jerusalem unites us, brings us together. But it's the Israeli enemy occupier that is destroying the very fabric of Jerusalem. That is turning this well-structured, beautiful place that should be beautiful, should be as we imagine it, a place for all that unites. The existence of those outsiders is destroying the structure of the poem as much as it is destroying the structure of the very essence of our lives, Palestinians. Okay? Before I move to the second question, you want to say something? Huh?
I was going to say something about the pattern, why I think he changed. Well, in the first stanza, basically he's not describing anything. He's just stating ideas and thoughts. And in the other stanza, we find description. So what I think happened is that if he used the classical style, the description of the modern view would seem like an archaic picture. So he shifted to a more modern way of description in order to give us a sense that this is the present day. To not make
A sense that is chaotic and messy.
No, like if we use the classical style of description and using the same way, maybe the picture will seem like.
Are you suggesting that Arabic poetry, classical Arab poetry, is incapable of describing this in this way?
No, it is capable.
Ah.
But, like, just a way of change.
Okay, so this is going back to attracting the attention of the readers.
And this, okay, the classical Arabic poetry is capable of describing modern pictures, but if we're going to describe something that's going on, something chaotic, as you said, I think he did the right thing by using...
By taking out the structure?
Yeah, taking out the structure.
So, and again, this is what some of you already suggested, that the fact that here the second stanza is dominated by outsiders, invading intruders, the Zionist occupation, the enemy occupier, destroys the very shape and form and fabric and structure of the poem. But other than this, if you look at the first poem, some of you suggested that here we have the past, present, and future. I think Tamim is also trying to connect this, Jerusalem, with our past, our future, and our present. The fact that he's using this, again, Arabic traditional form, he's basically connecting, I think, connecting Jerusalem with our identity as Arabs, again, with the Muslims or Christians. And again, maybe he's implying that if we want to have Jerusalem back, we have to go back to our roots. Arabs have never been united. But in the past, we were a lot better than now. Because today, we're not only fighting against the Israeli enemy occupier, we're also fighting against, because, sometimes we are hurt more by ourselves than by Arabs around us, the Arab regimes. Sadly, normalization with the occupier. So this could be an indication that we need to go back to our roots. We need to go back to our past, to our origins as Arabs, in order to have Jerusalem back. And that's why probably basically the past simple, the present simple, and the future simple tenses are used here. And I want to go back to the dialogue here. Yes, there is a dialogue in the first stanza, although it's a dialogue made up between an internal dialogue. Monologue, what's a monologue? Between yourself. So you and yourself, it's basically some kind of dialogue also. Okay? But here, look, we lose the dialogue. We lose the dialogue. This is a monologue now, monologic. It's one way. There's one image, there's one world view here dominated by the occupation, the occupiers.
Can I say something about the shape?
There is one world view in the second part. One party dominating everything. Even when Arabs are mentioned, they are only on the margin. A street vendor selling something exotic. Not that I'm suggesting that Fijil is exotic, but something that would attract the tourists. Like, wow, what is this woman selling? Let's take pictures with her. Suggesting that for them, this Fijil is probably more precious, more attractive than Jerusalem herself. Let me say instead of itself. One more thing, please.
I just want to say that it seems that his nostalgic to what's happening like in the past, because like in the first stanza he's saying that ماذا تعرف حين تزورها or something.
Yeah.
And the second thing he starts describing what you see when you visit it. So I think that
There is nostalgia. There's a sense of nostalgia.
In the first stanza, he is restricted with many English grammars like rhyme and caesura and many English like grammar. In the second stanza, he writes 3 verses as if he need to reach a message to the Israeli occupation. We need to be free, not.
That's also one way of putting it. Freeing. We need this kind of freedom. But we don't have it. Someone else, an outsider, does.
I get the image when I read the first stanza and the second, that he went, like, I imagined that when he is outside Jerusalem, he wrote in a very poetic way, very organized way, to show how he imagined it as very beautiful. But when he came in, he became disappointed because of what he saw, like many things, like not what he imagined. He imagined like people who pray, people who worshiping, not being like this.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll jump, just give me 2 minutes so we finish this class. I'll jump to this last image very quickly. And look at how beautiful the imagery in Tamim is. I think he's unmatchable in many ways. وَنَوَافِذٌ تَعْلُو الْمَسَاجِدَ وَالْكَنَائِسِ. Yeah? The nawafidh, the windows. You know, the windows on top. What are the windows doing? They're holding. This is a personification. You know, personify, personification, tashkhis, to talk about something as if it's a human being. Holding what? Somebody's hand. That's a metaphor, a personification. But whose hand is this? The hand of the morning. So this motherly window here is holding the hand of the baby-like morning at birth, because the day is, you know, is still young. This is a double metaphor, uniquely done, masterfully done by Tamim. أمسكت بيد صباح تريه كيف النقش بالألوان. Because in Palestinian ancient mosques and churches, there's the mosaic, you know, windows with yellow and blue and green and very colorful mosaic. So the windows are saying, because the daylight is colorless, right? Yes. It's colorless. So it's like, you know, you go to your grandma and she looks at you, look at you all thin, and she keeps stuffing you with food. And it is like, what? You're colorless here. If you come here to me, this is how you become colorful. You pass by me from one side, outside, to the inside, and then it's all colorful. But this is still a kid, a baby day. And again, this is another dialogue here. But this is not the dialogue that ends with, you know, a lot of bloodshed. حتى إذا طال الخلاف وإن طال الخلاف تقاسم فالصبح حر خارج العتبات. If the day wants to stay outside the window, you're free, you do whatever you want, you be the way you like. But if you get inside the mosque, under the dome, through the window, فعليه أن يرضى في حكم نوافذ الرحمن. And I love the word nawafidh again here. Here it doesn't mean windows. Nawafidh al-Rahman here means the orders, the commands, the will, and the wishes of God. And this is in English called a pun. A word with 2 meanings. Playing on this thing. Look at the imagery. Look at how concrete this is. Some of the most beautiful poetry ever. I'll stop here. My question for you, other than again trying to connect the reason why Tamim is shifting from a well-structured stanza in the opening to a formless stanza. What are the features of Palestinian literature as seen in Tamim's poem? Listen, if some of you are interested in doing a research paper, optional, I'm not saying this is part of the class assessment. If some of you are interested in doing a research paper, come to me. We can talk about these things. We can examine dialogism in Tamim. We can examine how Christians and Muslims always come together. We talk about features of Palestinian poetry and literature. I'll stop here. Thank you very much. If you have a question, please ask. And for next class, we're going to do an English poem from the 16th century, Whoso Lives to Hunt. يعطيكم العافية.